I'm Bruno. I'll be your GM. That's the face you're going to see every week when you're doing turns. A quick history on the game. I was saying previously that it's the 27th year that the game exists. We've been playing so far 16 of those 27 years. Why? Because, as some of you, I am a father. I got three child. So at that point, I took breaks for that, work, studies and other things made it that we were just played 16 of the 27 years. So how did it start? It started when I was younger. I was in high school and we had this grand idea of doing a game because I was fairly involved in sport, in tennis in particular. I didn't have time to do Dungeon and Dragon like the rest of my friends, so I wanted to create something I could do for an hour or two. Ghislain was actually the first player. He wanted to play this year, but he had some family issues, so he will be playing next year, which will be exciting that the first player to even have thought of Emperor is playing the game. Then it kind of stopped there. I went to university. I studied 1 year in anthropology, and at that point, we needed to do kind of a way to make the public aware of history. And I chose to create a game because, again, I was involved with role playing games. Did that, and from there, it took off and became every year a bit more defined, a bit more bigger and better. So like I said, over 27 years of creation, but 16 years of evolving the game. So for older players, what I mean by that is for a player that's been playing for more than 2 or 3 years, they're usually older, but that's okay. Um, the major difference between 3.3 and 4.0 is pretty impressive. So we have, for the first time in about 10 years, reviewed every formula macro system that generated Emperor and decided to classify them in four spheres. And you'll see that throughout the game. So war is a sphere, social, diplomacy, and economy. Um, Prior to that, we had relationship to those spheres, but not all the macros and formula were attached to one of those. We have also shrunk the map. As much as it looks bigger, it is smaller just because we decided to put the Mayan and Aztecs in the game. So there's a lot of ocean that has been added to the map, but you'll see that transport over water goes a lot faster than units on land. So at that point, obviously, we'll discuss this further, but made the map a bit smaller. Um, we reviewed all the exploration, all the war system. So you'll see that later. We added religion and culture as a major player, and you'll see that even further. We've tidied up all the spreadsheets so it's cleaner, it's more interactive, it's better to see the information. And we've also added religious figures, which is the first year. So finger crossed that it doesn't crumble and die on its own, but it should work fine. So those are the major changes from 3.3 to 4.0. Now, the basic of the game is simple. First, I want to be clear that the idea of the game is to have fun. It's great to want to conquer the world, and it's never fun when I say, do you have 2 minutes? We need to chat. Most of you will all live that phone call. One will never have it, obviously, because he's going to win the game. But there's a point where you lose, you die, and you'll see that little message going from Bruno going, we need to chat. Do you have 2 or 3 minutes? And usually that means we're going to chat about what happened. So, I mean, enjoy the game. Um, the other idea behind the game is to learn for new players that are in it's to learn how things work. Rarely do we see a first year winning the game. I'm not saying it won't happen. What I'm saying is enjoy the process. So that's very important to
That's
learn
funny.
too. So with that said, we're going to start reviewing the the sheets. So this is the map spreadsheet we call. This will disappear at week 2. And the reason is that I ask your email address because it's going to be sent to you by an Excel on an Excel spreadsheet. So the things we've discovered over the years is that if we put it on Google Docs, you can't really zoom in, zoom out. It slows down the process. We had major issue over the year. What we wanted to you when we send you your sheets is for you to understand where exactly you are in the type of environment that's around you. So this is a nation square. So the 20 by 20, the little squares are what we call regional square or small square. And the bigger square is what we call nation square. So 20 by 20. So any white square is basically snow or ice or
I'm not
high
playing golf.
peaks of mountains. So the white blocks
I'm not
can
playing.
never be crossed. So you need to understand that if you're trying to go to another city, you have to go around those squares. So you have two different type of grays. One are heavy mountains, others are small. You'll see certain units are able to go through them at half speed or quarter of of the speed of the unit. Other unit like cavalry don't do mountains. So at that point, you will have to avoid that if you're leading or sending cavalry
No, I'm saying.
units to attack. The two shades of gray, one is deep forest like
Never.
forest. The major difference there is on cattle farming, farming, and lumber mills. So depending on where you're located, some gives more wood, the other one gives a bit more land to work magic on. So you need to be aware of that. The It looks like a pinkish yellow, not beautiful color, but you'll see on the Excel spreadsheet, it's really yellow. The desert is basically hostile grounds. You will encounter it more to the south, Africa, some part of the Mid East. So at that point, you're half speed in the desert, except certain units thrive in that condition and move faster. So you'll need to be aware of that too. Then we have two different shades of blue. One is freshwater, the other one is oceans. Again, I'll explain the difference later, but you need to be aware that rivers do fishing differently and than ocean fishing. The V are for village. The BV are bigger villages that are in the process of becoming cities. The C are cities, and in anything that's named is a major city, so it has a population between 25,000 to 100,000, compared to a village that would have 1,000, a big village 3,000, and a city 12,500. So keep in mind that um, that at that point, the army is always dependent of the population. So the bigger the population, the bigger chance of having a bigger army. We're starting to really get into the big of things is the record sheet. Records are very important because they will basically tell your story. So at the bottom where you see turn 1 right here, this would be the number of action points you would have for this turn. I will write the action you're taking, and you'll see this live as I type it in, the type of the description, the number of AP, the number of time you're doing it, and the cost in action point. So you need to understand that you start with lower action point. At one point, you will have up to 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100. We saw people going up to 178 action points. So We need to really define all action that are done. Once that's done, at the end of the week, I do an update, and where you see announcement in red, that's where the news will appear. You maybe your explorer will meet another explorer. It's going to be there. Maybe you have a disease. Maybe you had some crime going out. A disease could be that you have a child. Could be that somebody approached you. No, an economy proposal came in. So everything that happens will be put in that square. So at that point, it's right in your face. You should always look at announcement before doing turns to see if you have anything to deal with that week. So this will all happen in turns. If you go a bit lower in administration, you need to understand that having cities cost AP. Every city costs 5 action points to administer, and each village costs 3 action points. Now, that being said, you'll see that in some skills and in some technology and some hiring, you can lower that cost. So at that point, that's something that you may be willing to do to gain action point to do other types of actions. So we left the example of actions pretty small. The idea is, to be honest with you, the first time you do turns, it's going to go more like, okay, what do you want to do? And you'll say, well, I need to address this. I want to do this. Then it's going to be a learning process on how many action points actions are costing. Each time you're hiring, for example, it's 10 action points. Working a stats is 5. Working a skill is 1. Building a structure, any building, is 10 action points. Hiring an advisor or getting married, you decide how many action points, and that will define the quality of partner, the quality of advisor you will have. The square right beside it is currency, because emperor, you can have your own currency. The world currency at this point is actually the LB, the large bronze, and everything is compared to that. So if you are to launch your own currency, and you'll see in the manual, we'll eventually get there and you'll have the information, you need to have the skills currency at 50, but the material, your type of economy, all plays a role. And then you will see how much your currency is doing versus the LB. So if it's higher, cost of infrastructure will go down. You know, if it's lower, then building stuff will cost more. Right beside that, we have the religious and culture tab. So remember when I did the introduction, I told you religion and culture would play a bigger part, and it will, because at that time it was two things that had a huge impact on society. So those are little ways of gaining more AP. So each time you convert a city to your religion. So I'll take an example. I'm Catholic. I attack a city that is pagan Norse. And when I get the city, the majority of the population, so 51% or more, are not Catholic. I work through it, I build it, and then it becomes Catholic. So at that point, when it does that, you will gain 1 action point more. So converting cities will give you action point. Those action points are temporary in the sense that once it's become Catholic, you get the point and then it's over. Launching a crusade or jihad or some type of form of religious campaign will give you 10 action points all the way through the end of that campaign. So, example again, I will be a Catholic. I'm in France. I'm Paris. and I speak to the Pope, and the Pope's like, I'm going to give you 50,000 LB for you to attack this city. I launch a crusade. I move through nations. I get there. But all that process, through that process, if it takes me 5 turns to get there, I gain 10 action point a turn until I get there. Now, I need to tell you that Crusade will eat some of those action points as I go on. Then those temporary action points are put aside. So Be the Religious Empire gives you 10 action point per turns until you're kind of losing that. And the reason is that we see a great balance of religion in this game. But if you are the one with the biggest population, biggest nation with the most population of that religion, you're considered that religion empire. So at that point, what it does, it permits you to gain 10 action points per turn until somebody gets bigger than you of your religion and take away the title, thus gaining those 10 action points. The biggest religious infrastructure, it's exactly the same. If you build a religious structure and it gets bigger than any others, you will gain 10 action points per turn. So the idea is that if you look at that time, society was very focused on building those churches, those temples, those religious infrastructure. So that's what we're trying to recreate with this system. Culture, same thing. The biggest cultural infrastructure, if you convert a city to your culture, again, that city has to start with 51% of another culture or a mix of other culture, and then you convert them to your culture. Then at that point, you gain that point. And if you're the cultural empire, meaning that of all that culture, you have the most population of that culture, then at that point you get 10 action point per turn. Now it's going to be interesting because again, as religion, we were saying the culture is very much divided equally. So that's going to be kind of also a race of to see who could become that cultural center. Beside it, we have squares, and it's important to put it there, and it's understand to be able to identify the color. We're very much color themed. So nation square on your map will always be yellow. So what's a nation square? A nation square is a square that is basically 20 by 20, but also is from your original nation. So I'm playing Novgorod and I conquer everything and I declare that square my nation square. It's mine, it's my territory. It will become yellow. What does it do? Is basically that square will give me 1 action point per turn because this is my territory. So the bigger you are, the more action point you gain. That being said, if I unite all my nation, you'll see later that too gives me action points. So culture city, religious city, we spoke about it. That's where you'll see the temporary action point happening because you could be converting more than one city at a time, or you could be converting one in culture, one in religion. So it's a good way for us to stay focused and actually understand how many temporary action points you have for that week. Control squares are squares that you control, like the nation square. I've declared that mine, but it's not from my original nation. So again, I'll try to take somewhere that people are a bit more familiar with. I'm England and I'm conquering the northern part, Alba or Strathclyde or something like that. That is not my original nation, but if I declare it and it becomes mine, it will also give me action point. So depending on which nation you have, it could be really quickly to get all your nation square, but it can be at that point a bit longer to expand in other nation. Other nations are bigger, so they get more action point from within their nation, but it will take them more time to expand in other nations. So there's a balance there. So the smallest nation is 1/8 of a nation square, so 1/8 of a 20 by 20, and the bigger nations are 12 nation square, meaning 12 square of 20 by 20. After that, you have kind of a recap of your action points. So how many cities you have, how many villages you have, because that takes action points away from you because you need to administer them. Your number of action points is written right there, 13, but you have a city that costs 5, so that's why you have the little 8 here. You would have 8 action points. So 13 action point minus the admin. The first city, you need to understand, the first city doesn't put admin point until you gain a second city. So you'll all start and you all see that city 1, your city 1 doesn't cost you anything. Now, 2 things can happen. You can have another city, then now you're starting to pay administration point for both cities, or you can take a major city, a bigger city, and try to move everything there. If you do that, you will start paying administration point on that bigger city. That will be considered your second city. So if we go lower than that, you have the square points. So all your nation and control squares. You'll have your cultural point in case you have the bigger culture, the bigger cultural empire structure, or you're the cultural empire. You'll see the points here. Religion is the same thing. It's the tab we talked about. So if you're launching a crusade or you have the bigger infrastructure, you would see there. Now, what's different here is once you establish yourself and you feel strong enough that you can claim that you're the king of your nation. Obviously, easier to do in a nation that's 1/8 of a square than 12 square, but when you feel comfortable, you claim that, that's going to give you 15 action points per turn. Now, the consequences of that is that if you don't have your whole nation, every major city will declare war on you because they're not following you in this. Now, you can have diplomatic tie and do it economically in a way that they let you do it. That's possible. But most of the time, they will declare you war. The second consequences to that is that I'm going to announce to all the other players that you're king of that nation. So let's say I'm playing the Song Dynasty. So at that point, once I declare myself king, I'm gonna actually be putting the information out. Bruno is now the king of the Song Dynasty. What that creates is that if there's player around me, they're now aware that a player is playing that nation, and I'm unaware of them being there. So it can be tricky to do that. But at one point, if some people are starting to do it, I mean, they're gaining now 30 action point a week that you don't have. So just make the math. It could go really up really quickly. The next one is People United. So if there's no more city and major city in your nation, you've conquered all of them, we consider that the population is under your control and that your nation is united. And that will give you another 15 action points per turn. So, and the last one is the what we mean by united land and square base is that total nation space that you are now in control of will give you action points. So this is the record sheet. Like I said, there's a lot of information there. So United land is based on square, not on city and villages. So people united doesn't count village and big villages. So they don't have enough of a diplomatic and economy impact to make. So when you unite the land, it's always the major cities and the cities. So the record sheet is basically a lot of information in your face when you're doing turns. Am I doing well with religion? Am I doing well with culture? Do I have a currency? And how many action points do I have and where are they coming from? So that's the record sheet for you. Obviously, when we're doing turns, we're discussing and I'll refer to it. You can ask me where to find the information. So you're never really alone, but this is a good way of knowing, do I have enough action point to do what I need and to plan forward for action for the following weeks. The second important tab is the character sheet. So basically, you, your family, your advisors, how competent you are, and how new to this you are. At this point, you'll start seeing colors and try to associate them with different things. So usually, purple means social. Green is usually economy, red is war, and blue is diplomacy. The reason we put family in your character in blue is that, okay, I'll take a step back. I'll explain the spheres. So diplomacy is everything that has to do with a relationship that is not tied to your population or citizens. Social is any tie with your own population and citizens. Economy is anything that has to do with money or food. And war is everything that has to do with military or physical conflicts. And you'll see what I mean later on. So the reason the character information, the family information, and your skill is in blue is because they're usually based to a link you have with something. So at that point, that's why we thought that blue was the best color for your character and your family, because you're having a relationship with your family, obviously with your partner. The skills you'll see have color within themselves that link that skill to one of those spheres. So for your character, you have your name, which was given from you to me, your gender, if you're male or female, your nationality, so your nation, your religion, which Fatimid are Muslims, your culture, which is Buranis at this point, your percentage of death, which the computer will start rolling once you hit 30. So at this point, that's the percentage that will go up with age, but down if you do work some of the stats, and we'll see them later. Then you have your spouse or your husband, your partner, their age. This is the percentage that the computer will roll to see if you are or if your partner is pregnant. Now, every partner or advisor has a score. The scores are here. So obviously, the higher the scores, the better they are at being in their role. So if your partner has a high score, it takes some of the administration away from you. Remember that city that costs 5 action points to administer may not be there because your spouse or your husband is taking that away from you. So they say, I'll administer the city, dear, you go and conquer the world. So that's one plus of being married. They have a percentage of death, again, following their age. They are also have some skill bonus and give you action point bonus, because the idea behind the partner is that they will help you try to administer your kingdom. They will make decision, maybe smaller decision, but things to help you. So a partner in this game compared to 3.3 is all about the action points. They're giving you action points, they're taking away administration points, cost, and they're giving you bonuses to certain skills. Your family information is next. So children are also good and have scores, and will let you know. So how do we define the score of your child? It's some part is from being rolled, but it's always in tone with the score of your partner and your statistics. So if you don't work your statistics and you marry and your partner is a 2 in score, your child won't start with a good score. Doesn't mean it can't be worked on. It's just the base is not that solid. So what do? They will give you bonuses. And obviously they have a chance to die. Please note that in those time, the danger age were younger, the 0 to 5 particularly. So if you see a high percentage of death at a young age, don't be worried. This will go down as they get older and then back up as they reach the 30 mark. Again, if you live that long. Another advantage to having kids is if you die and your kid is 13 and up, it can actually take your place. So you don't really lose the game, you just lose your character, and there's a transfer of power. So character, partner, family. The rest of the tabs are your advisors. So in 3.3, we had a general in with your army. Now we changed that. It's too hard to administer. We're advisors. So your general will have an impact on all your armies in all your empire. As you can see here, he has an age, he has a score, he has a percentage of death, and then gives you all those bonuses, which you'll see later on in your skills. So at that point, he's giving bonus to this, plus he's giving bonus to your units, and we'll talk about it later. Advisors are people that make decisions that have an impact on a day-to-day, and they create within your population unrest. So the better the advisor, the less unrest he creates within the population. That means he's maybe more social, he could be maybe more just, more able to be fair, and lower score advisors maybe lack those abilities, so it creates unrest within your population. Your steward advisor, your money advisor, your economic advisor, you can name him the way you want. Same thing, age, score, percentage of death, but he helps with everything that has to do with money and food, because the economy in that period of time included money, but also food. So he is the one that's going to make sure that your population is fed, that the taxes are collected, that your infrastructure are not breaking down. So he is also a very valuable advisor. Now, again, depending on his score, he will create unrest within your population. The next one is your religious advisor. So he's more diplomatic. So you can see the blue here for diplomacy. You can see a bit of purple also, because it touches a bit of the social of that time, but mainly he's your diplomatic / religious advisor. So what he does is basically helps your religion, helps you gain influence, helps convert people to your religion, and at this point helps you gather information and do diplomacy with other nation, other city, other players. Again, name, age, score, percentage of that. Your score, depending on the score, is how much unrest he will create within your population. Your people advisor, your social advisor, your cultural advisor is purple all the way in. He's there for your population. Again, helping with the culture conversion, education, their rights, immigration, all your services, fire, crime, disease, research and technology, and health. So at that point, he's really geared towards the population. And again, his age score defines the unrest. And the better he is, the less unrest he will create within your population. So you, partner, children, and your council, your advisors. For the rest, we'll refer them to them a lot throughout this presentation. You need to understand when it comes to your character, there's three spheres. There's the statistics, the skills, and the scores. So war, social, diplomacy, economy, and within those, you have stats, you have skills, and you have scores. And we'll go through them and I'll explain all of them. Stats. Statistics is if you met your leader in a room. What would he look like? Presence. How smart would it be? Intelligence. How wise would it be? Knowledge. How much leadership would he have? Willpower. Would he be big? Constitution. Would he be strong? Strength. All of those statistics work and give bonuses to your skills, create bonuses to your scores, and creates a bunch of advantage in your diplomacy, social, economy, and war situation. So if you're really acts on war, strength, constitution should be two things you're looking at for your character. If he's more of the economy type, maybe intelligence would be better. If he's more diplomatic, presence might be something that you're looking at. So all your stats are here. You'll see numbers. This is your starting nation score. Now, everybody's equal in the sense that it may not be all the same, but at the end, everything is equal. You can put points, and we saw that in the records. If I spend 5 action points, I have the right to put 1 more point in statistics, which will raise my total. Every stats has a modifier attached to it and another what we call a statistic score attached to it. So your action points right here are based on knowledge, intelligence, and willpower. So if I was to raise knowledge, intelligence, and willpower, I would gain more action points. They are in order of influence. So if I work knowledge, I will gain more action point than if I worked intelligence. Your health points is for different reasons. You're in war and you get into a war situation, you're in combat and you could die. Health is the way to go. Health also will be guided if you get a disease and that's confirmed, then health will define if you're dying from that disease. Health can be somebody sends an assassin to kill you. Will you survive? Health will define that. And health is mainly based out of con, then strength, and then knowledge. The immune system is really there for one thing: disease. Disease is a major factor at that time, and it is in this game. Disease that are being created will move within regions and places in the world and may actually hit you even though you have your own cities under control. So to see if you contract a disease, strength, con, will. Now, if you fall sick, it doesn't mean you die. Health will define, are you losing all your action points? Are you losing part of your action points? Are you losing no action points? Or are you at that point ill to a point where you may die or actually die from the disease? Keep in mind, we have player every year dying from disease. It's not uncommon, so you need to keep your eye on the ball with that one. Then you have your war, diplomatic, and economy that are linked to your stats. Again, the stats are noted here. Now you have a different column called earn here. So each time you win a battle, each time you make a diplomatic treaty, each time you get an economy treaty, could be a trade route, could be anything else, we'll see that later, you will earn points, which will raise your statistic score. So this is what we refer at when we talk about statistics. It's your person that you see in that room. The second module we talked about were skills. And skills work a bit differently. Skills is your knowledge. So you can have knowledge in war, you can have knowledge in diplomacy, you can have knowledge in social, and you can have knowledge in economy. So military skills, tactics, strategy in C, you can put point in, which are here, and they cost 1 action point per point. You have modifier. Remember, your advisor gives you bonuses there. Your family may give you bonuses there. And not only that, but your statistics will give you bonuses too, and will give you a total. The better you are, the better your score will be. So the higher score, and that we'll talk later on, will affect a multitude of things. So military, you have tactics, offensive, defensive, movement. Not written properly, I do apologize. Strategy, infantry, cavalry, archery, and siege engines, and your C component, which are your ships. Again, diplomacy, discretion, that's good for your NT spies. Influence, lower fear, and we'll see that later on. Raise happiness, lower rebellion, raise diplomacy stats, and then raise your spy rate, and we'll speak about that later on too. Cultural is more aim at your cities, raise your culture, your birth rate, your research, lower disease, fire, unrest, raise immigration, lower fire rate, crime rate, helps with the religion component and your cultural component. Your economy skill, trades, we'll talk about markets later on. It's mainly how you make money. Your currency, we spoke about it, starting your own currency. Taxation is how much you're taxing people and how efficient you are at getting those taxes. Import, export, important for your markets. If they can't sell anything, they won't stay open. Stability, your economy stability. We'll speak about that when we talk about your own money, but we'll speak about it too when we speak about buyouts, and you'll see that later on. Infrastructure, your buildings, raise the value of your food. We'll speak about that too, and you'll see alternative food, minerals, stones are all stuff that you can actually find and get money, to exploit, to have money. Stones, livestock, fishing, farming is all your food component, and we'll see them in details in the city tab. Now, the only one we couldn't categorize is your administration skill. What does it do? It actually lower the cost of administration. So the higher that stats, the lower your administration costs will be. Now, the thing you need to understand, you cannot put more than 100 points in your skills. Once it's at 100, your modifier may change, your total may change, but the number of points can go to a maximum of 100. The last component for characters is called scores. Scores is the hidden stats, if you want, that touches everything in that circle. Remember, we spoke about those four circles, those four spheres. Well, that score will touch anything and everything within that sphere. So your diplomacy score will have an impact on everything that's blue, your social score, everything that's purple, economy, green, so on, and war score is right here, same thing. So on your diplomacy score, you have your spy score and anti-spy score. In 3.3, you send 5,000 spies. I had 4,000 anti-spies. You were in, you got the information. Not how it works for 4.0. 4.0, it's going to be the number of spies you have and adjust it to your score against the number of anti-spy adjusted by his score. The difference of percentage will give you information. So if your spy beats the anti-spy by 1%, you'll get the population by 10%, farming, so on and so forth. Now, it says by 85%, please note that your spy score and anti-spy score can go way beyond 10%. So that 85, by doing simulation and playing amongst each other, I was able, because that's one of my strong suit, able to get a high score really rapidly and get the information I needed. Others were based more out of war and economy, and that also made the game interesting and different for them. So you need to understand, depending on the difference of score, you will get different information. Start with population, what type of farming, are they in the positive in food, their culture, how much handle do they have in culture, religion, their economy, their boats, the army, and finally the army type they have. So this is your diplomacy score. Now, you can actually get the information by sending diplomats. The problem with diplomats is they're visible. So if diplomats come into my city, let's say Diego sending 100 diplomats to my city, I have three options when they get to my door. I can turn them away, said, sorry, not trusting you. I can kill them, which creates a war. So Diego at that point has the right to declare war to Bruno, and it costs 0 action point because I created that tension. And 3, I can let them in. Depending on the skill of the diplomats, compare if I have diplomats in my city. Again, the same comparison happens. It's my diplomacy score with the number of diplomats against Diego's diplomats with his diplomacy score. So those are 2 ways of getting information from a city before attacking it and trying to manage it, trying to envision how that's going to happen. Your economy score will help everything economy. Could be trade, could be your markets, could be infrastructure, could be anything and everything into that sphere. But it also will permit me to give me an amount to buy a city. So I don't have enough soldier, but I have tons of cash. My economy's blooming. I'm doing a fortune every turn, but I have, little soldiers. I'm having issues with my population. It's hard to hire. So I'm going to say, screw this. I'm going to buy it out. So any city, big village, and villages controlled by AI will have a price. And that price will be defined by my economy score. Right now, to buy a city, it's $1 million. Big village, $500,000. And a village, it's $250,000. That being said, I'll be able to buy out or try to buy out major cities or cities owned by other players. Now, the only condition, well, you have several conditions to a buyout, and we'll see that later. But you need to use their currency, or you need to have enough money to buy it out, and you need to have people inside helping you. And we'll see that later. But just know that with your economy, yes, you're helping your economy to grow, but you're also giving you the opportunity to also buy them out. Your war score, like I said, is the score that defines your war techniques or possibilities. And we'll see that later, because war is a large module and we'll talk about it. There's different types of war, which is different from 3.3. So we'll see that. But just know it's not because it's a little tab that it has no impact. It has a huge impact, but just not in the same way that the other two. Your social score, same thing here, will touch everything that is related to social. Again, not because the tab is small that it doesn't have an impact. It actually has a huge impact on your population. So this is your character tab. So each time we speak about it, remember, you have your family, your council, and the three things, which is statistics, skills, and scores. Moving on. Empire tab. Empire tab is fairly easy to understand. It's basically, you will expand to a point where you'll have more than one city, 2 cities, 3 cities, might be up to 20 cities. And it's hard to go tab by tab each city and trying to figure out what's going on. So we did kind of a resume for you. Population, their social rates, your economy. Is it part of a central economy? We'll talk about that later. The soldiers, the spies, and the boat you have in that city. So it gives you a quick view of that city. Am I in trouble? Do I need to address the population? Do I need to address the money and the food there? Or do I need to have more soldier or less soldier? And where are my soldier in my damn empire? Because as you get bigger, you'll touch multiple front with other players, and you'll have to define which front's bigger and how the flow of your army within that map is going to happen. And the way you're going to see that is by going and seeing an overview of your soldiers and where they're at. Every week, the computer is going to roll for your crime rate, your fire rate, and all of that. And we'll see that later. Just know they roll every time. And if something happened because of it, it's going to be in your records on announcements. So it's not hidden anywhere. It's right in your face for you to address. The Empire tab also is your research tab or technology tab. So all your research will be written here. They're actually all there. They're just hidden. So each time you say, I want to research my special unit, and I'm saying that because it's visible, but then it's going to appear there, and you have 4 levels to every technology, or most of them. Some of them have 2, some of them have 1, because if you have your special unit, you have it. You don't need to go beyond that. Other special unit, you can research special unit from other nation. You have the right to 4 in total, 3 other, and they need to be researched too. So the Empire's tab, pretty straightforward. It resumes basically all your cities and your technology. The main tab, the one that you will be looking at and trying to figure out the most, is your city tab. Things to know right off the bat: every city can have a village attached to it. Not 2, not 3, 1 village. And that village component in food and resources is thrown into the city. City. You will name your city and eventually conquer bigger city that already have names. And those cities need to thrive, need to grow, need to be sustainable for you to win the game. We always say, and you'll hear that, if you don't build a good foundation at the start, when there's 4, 5, or 3 players left, It's always that makes usually the biggest impact. My city are now revolting. I'm fighting two other big empires. I just lost the game. So make sure your foundation is solid so you can grow from within. So on top, you have kind of a quick snapshot of your city. What's its income? What's its income in grain? So right now I'm losing money, but I'm gaining a lot of grain. So if we make a difference, I'm actually over 46,000. Now, they don't mix. You can transfer one to the other, and we'll see how later on, but just know grains are grains and LB are LB. The only difference is that in your capital city, the capital city is the city you reside in, always. In your capital city, where you're residing, you can actually pay for stuff in grain, not the other cities, just your capital city. All right? Your economy score is going to be here, and that's going to define your buyout. So technically, a buyout, and that's explained in your manual. You need certain conditions. Sorry, it's the first time we have a manual, so I'll try to Gary's be really good at comparing the book to what I'm saying. Thank you. Just know that there's certain condition to be done. I'll get to there just a minute. To buyouts. So buyouts needs 4 conditions to actually happen. 1, the unit has to be in the city and has to be unchallenged. Meaning, if I'm sending spies to a city and there is anti-spies, my spies are being challenged, I cannot do the buyout. If I send diplomats and you have diplomats in your city, your diplomats are challenging my diplomats, I cannot have a buyout. So I need to have a unit in your city in order to buy you out. Be careful. If you're Catholic and the Pope's being played, he has priests in your city that are unchallenged. You're Catholic. You cannot kill those priests. Now, they have other problems if they're doing that, and I'll explain that later when we go under concept and I explain those religious figures. But know this, priests of any religion are uncontested by religious figures. You are uncontested by religious figures. The second is the city has to be buy out in that currency. So if Diego has his own currency and he calls it the Diego coin, and I'm in the LB, I have to find a way to get enough Diego coin to buy him out. Second condition. Third, my economy score has to be higher than his. So if I'm at 20%, he's at 18, I'm good to go. If I'm 18 and it's 35, I can't. And lastly, I cannot buy out his capital where he's residing. Let's say I meet those 4 requirements. This is the amount I have to pay to buy that city out. So for city 1, it would be $1.246 million. So that's the buyout. And that's why the economy score is important. Because if I have a high economy score and I manage to get a unit in your city that is unchallenged, I can buy it out. So that is a component to the game. Centralized economy. That was new from 2 years ago. Somebody was really economy and he's playing Paul. He's the leader of the Muslim. He's very economy based and made us rethink the whole economy thing. So what is central economy? is for you to be able to bring all the money from your cities to your capital city, and from there being able to buy infrastructure with money to any cities within those centralized economy. Example, I have my capital named Gatineau, and I have four other cities. Some are doing more LB, some are doing more grain, some are in the hole in certain things. Everything sent to my capital. If that city is in a deficit of something, the capital is going to pay it. If they have a surplus, I will have the surplus. All my money, all my treasury will be in my capital city. And that transport is going to be done by transports, by by cohorts of heavy vehicles going in and out and bringing the money and moving money around. It permits me to buy any infrastructure in any cities because all the money is in my capital, as opposed of not a centralized city where I use their own treasury to buy things. But if I don't have the money there, then I can't buy it. Where if it's centralized, I get a lot more money because all the money in the grain is pulled together, and then it gives me a better chance of buying more expensive infrastructure. That being said, if I siege a city in that central economy, remember it has nothing there. In a siege, it won't last long. So you need a system to be able to send an army quickly when that city gets sieged. If not, then at that point, that city is going to fall real quickly. Also, a new component this year in war, you can actually attack that transport if you know where the transport is. There's multiple ways of gaining that information. If it is and that transport is being attacked, all the money or the grain that was being brought to you or sent to that city to pay the deficit is now being raided and gone, meaning the player gains that money, and now I have to pay double for it to have its deficit paid because the first payment was gone, so I need to pay it again. So centralized economy is a good way. It gives you a lot of purchase power real quickly, but it has some consequences. It has some weaknesses that you have to be aware of. After this, you have your treasury. How many money, how many grain do I have in that city? You all start with 250,000 LB and 250,000 grain. So it's a good start for you. You may decide to do one way, the other way. It's up to you, and that's where the game starts. People go in different directions. Then you have the type of wall, your defensive wall. So right now you have a city, so it's a wooden palisade. Everybody has that. It's wood walls, very standard. And then you have a reminder of your diplomacy score and social score. Why is the war score not there? Because if you go lower, you have a whole thing about military, and that's the only thing it impacts, where the other one is a cross of several things. Now, the next tab below that is your social cultural tab. Again, remember, social diplomacy, very important. Your religion is here. So you have your main religion. So I'm Muslim at 80%. I have some pagans at 10% and Christian at 10%. That creates a religious scores of 66. So if I convert people to my religion, the more it's converted to me, the better score I have, the less tension I have. Now, as you expand, you're going to expand into different culture and different religion. And that's where the problems start. If within your starting cities, you have issues, it's hard to manage every city. So you really want those cities to be solid as you expand forward. Now, you have your cultural tab. It is the same way. This is very new. So you have a list of cultures. There's a lot of them. It tells me here My empire culture is Buranis. And in that city, if I look for it, or in an alphabetical order, Buranis, I have 65% of my people of that culture. Any culture with the same color is called my main culture. So they are different, but they're not different enough to have an impact within my culture. Associated culture are cultures that have kind of tendencies. For example, if I had the vulgar Bulgar in Novgorod, they're beside each other. Their culture is a bit different, but they're fairly similar. So they're associated. We do certain things the same way. We do some things different, but mostly we're the same. Opposed culture are culture that are tends not to get along. Um, there's a lot of them. To be honest with you, I would not go into details. Let's be honest. Long time ago, Genghis Khan from the Mongolian came into China and conquered it. There was a major difference in culture. They were opposed. They didn't like each other. Created some tension. He took steps to fix that. It doesn't mean you have to go that route. Doesn't mean you have to be that way. There's several ways of fixing it. The best way of doing it is to try to make your culture your nation culture and try to push people towards it. Others are culture that you never heard about. If I'm playing a Japanese and I'm now attacking the Mayans and taking over Mayans, there's no way there's been a connection. So those are considered other culture. They're brand new culture. So they can go one side or the other, and they can have no impact to a lot of impact, but we don't know. Then at that point, you will have your city score for culture. The higher it is, the better it is. So religion, culture has major impact in my civic rates, have major impact in my military, in my population, on the way I do business. So the other one is crime rates. Those are standard rates that you would see and think of in a modern society, but they existed at that time too. Crime. The higher your crime rate, the more chance you have major crimes. What does crime do? It takes away from your treasury. So you want to solve that crime rate, especially if you have a central economy in your capital. You want this to be low because that's where the money is. It goes by percentage. If I have $1 million and I'm taking 3%, if I have $10,000 and taking 3%, they're not taking the same amount. Obviously, you want to be aware of that. Percentage of fire is if a fire starts. And at that period of time, you can go to your books. You'll see it's a major problem because there's not a system in place to be really efficient to fight fire. You know, you have those people with the buckets and the ladders, not very efficient. So you want to be sure that that's lower. Now there's fire spread. And what does it do? It counts the damage done by the fire. So once that defined, is there a fire? Yes. How bad is that fire? And this fire spread creates a percentage of a buyout. And that's what I'm taking away from your treasury if you want to fix that city. So the higher your fire spread, because in the past 3.3, it was like, okay, fire created $10,000 of damage. So people lowered fire rate in hopes to never have a fire. But if they had one, they didn't care really about this because the amount was never that big. Now you really want to attack those two numbers because maybe it's going to be 7%. Great for you, 10%, 20%, 25%. But if it happens, then this number kicks in. And if the number is high, I'm still taking a lot from you. So you may want to work that number also. Disease. Disease is a problem. It always been and always will be. If a disease come out, it kills population, it kills your military, it lower happiness, raise fear. It will also start moving within your empire really quickly, and so your other cities will be attacked. It will attack the region, and as it people fail their checks, it gets bigger, meaner, and kills even more people. To give an example, we had a disease that started last year in kind of Spain area, and by the time it happened to hit Novgorod, it had such momentum that he had a relatively good score, but still half his population was gone. So you need to know and figure out a way of lowering that percentage at one point. Fear, it's always good to have a little fear. People respect fear, especially in those times, but 91% is way too high. So people will tend to hide taxes, speak about you in a ill way behind your back, thus creating a better rebellion chance. It will also lower birth rate. It will lower immigration rate. It will create unrest, and so on and so forth. So you want fear to be low. You want happiness to be high. And at that point, that helps with other statistics. What happened when people rebel? Your military takes care of it. They kill the people. So you lose military, you lose population. And at that point, if you have no military there, your cops takes care of it. But your cops are not as efficient. So you lose even more even more population to get things under control. Immigration rate, birth rate, new babies, new people in your population is important. And you'll see later on for soldiers. You can do celebrations like the Romans, build a coliseum and do celebrations. People are entertained. They don't think about their problems. So it will give you a bonus, and it will tell you how many weeks that bonus is for. Note that with week passing, your bonus is going to lower and lower until it reaches zero again. Unrest, your council, we spoke about it. Your partner, your advisors all create unrest. So that doesn't help to your rebellion, doesn't help to your fear, doesn't help your happiness either. Oppression score. So military, cops, judge, whatever you name it, slavers, slave, they all have, some have greater power, some have no power, some are struggling to get power. So that creates your oppression score. How much does your population feel they have no say in anything? And that's important too, because oppression is directly linked to your rebellion rate. Your religious and cultural scores are here. The better they are at helping with happiness, helping with rebellion, helping lowering fear. The lower they are, the worse they are with those scores. So they're all interlinked and need to be addressed at one point. Like I said, it's better to address this right off the bat, get that under, so when you get bigger, your foundation is solid and it's easy to branch out. Population. Your men, women, children, elder, your birth, your immigration, your death, all there. You all start with 35,000 population. I'm not doing so well. I'm going to lose about 1,300 people next turn because my things are not high enough. Disease is probably high. People are dying. I want to change that to get a positive number. And it's going to give you my new population for next week. Social status. slave, peasant, poor. It's a good way of knowing where your people stand, how many people are working, how people are not working, how are they self-employed, but how many soldiers can I hire in that city? And that's where population becomes a resource. Because if I have low population and I cannot hire soldiers and my enemy can, he will win that war just by wave and wave and wave of soldiers. At one point, I will not be able to defend myself and I will die. This is the number of soldiers I have so far. The description of the units are lower. We'll go over that. So that's my social cultural tab. So anything in there I can look at, try to fix, try to work on, would be in that part when it comes to social and diplomacy. Food. Food is part of the economy, but we make its own tab because it's so vital. So I'm having wheat, and this is the number of grain I get from the harvest. My farmers are not super excited about it because I tax them 50%. So the more farms I have, the more grain I have. But there's other way to do grain. Another one, it's called alternative grain. So I have cattle I can have right here, and they will also provide me grain. Now, if I'm doing really well in grain, but I'm having issues with LBs, I can start selling some of the harvest to get money instead of grain. Now, it's not as profitable, like I'm not making millions out of it, but it may help if that's my only option. So always consider everything in that sphere. Fishing is another way to get grain. Coastal, lake and river works differently. They provide different amount of grain. Deep sea has to be researched, and deep sea fishing can only be done in places in the map that is of a different color. And you'll see that once you see it, it's a really dark blue on the map. And that permits you to do another type of fishing that is very, very successful. Now, another alternative are all here. They're all in the manual. Hunting is not as much about grain that it is about economy. So those hunters going to go into your deep forest and they will actually hunt, create fur, create meat, and stimulate your market, which will create money, which will create an economy, a local economy. And the better it is, the stronger it is, the more money you make. So hunters is a quick step at getting a better economy. Sheep and wool is another way of creating grain or LB. And milk and cheese is the same way. Milk and cheese needs bovine, and sheep and wool needs sheeps, but at that point, they're counted in that number. The other type of grains you can culture is barley and hay. Hay is for your cattle. You'll see later on, we'll explain how that works. And barley creates breweries. Breweries creates alcohol. Alcohol can be sold, so you're stimulating your economy. But people drinking makes people happy. I'm not saying it's a huge improvement, but it does help. So that would lower my fear and raise my happiness, lower my rebellion. All of a sudden, things are getting along. I'm making money. So everything is really superb. City possible land. That's what you want to look right now at your sheet. So it's going to give you the maximum amount of farm you can have, the maximum amount of forest, and the maximum amount of cattle land, and the maximum of fishing. Why is it important? Well, I have 150 farm. I could create 30 other farm because my maximum is 180. I could fish more because I have 100 ships right now doing coastal fishing, and my maximum is 250. I can have 480 hunters because I have 480 hunting grounds. Now, if I take the 30 farmland left and I was to put them in hay, that would create an amount of cattle possible, which would appear here, and that would permit me to buy cattle that would create grain. Depending on the amount of cattle, it would create pastures. Pastures is the infrastructure linked to cattle, just like grain, the infrastructure is your farms. So all those numbers are telling me a story. If I take this 30 and I put it here, it will tell me how many breweries I can build. Once I have that, I'll go into infrastructure, build those breweries, lower my fear, raise my happiness, and make me money. But those breweries cost money to build. So that is how the food tabs work. It's going to give me the total grain I get, the total amount of money from grain I get, and that will create my income in grain. All right. Perfect. Economy tab. All right. So the economy is all around your market. Right now I have one market, a maximum of 100 stand. I build 95 stand. I have 95 stand. And you see here, my economy is not doing so well. I can not really expand. I'm at minus 34, meaning of my 95 stand, I have 59 being used. So at that point, I have 61 open. Beg your pardon. My tax is always 50%. We'll see the tax later on. My economy is 2, meaning my economy score is not that high. The economy in the city is not that high. We're not really doing fairly well. Traffic is defined by my population. I just have 35,000 people. Not a lot of people going to the market right now. My rent, my income, my trade routes, stimulating my stands. I have none. The worth, how much is my market worth? And why are we putting that there? It's because if you conquer a city, you can sell that city. And at that point, I'm going to sell that market. And that's what will definitely provide me LBs when I sell it. Upkeep, how much it's costing me to keep that thing going. And the rate at which point we're doing the upkeep is 10%. So 10% of the worth is the upkeep. So market, the key of my economy turns around my market. So right now my question would be, how can I rise my economy? How can I raise my traffic? Can I get trades happening to raise that number, raise this here to be able to build more markets, make more incomes? All right. After that, you have all the other infrastructures. So my fishing boats, ships, if I fish, I get some boats. My farms, if I farm for grain, my farm is there. It's an infrastructure. Pasture, same thing. I can build a research center which will help me research new technology. I have sewers, aqueducts, well, public bath, all explained in the manual. They're helping with disease. They're helping with fire, with different things. Hospitals, same thing. Statues in school help me raise that culture base, right? School is like my church for religion. My school is where I'm going to convert people to my culture. Slave camp, if I have slaves, some do, some don't. You'll need slave camp to have your slave in. Jail, tribunal, a good way to help with your crime rate. Bank, mint, it's important to have that. So If you do have a crime wave, your bank's going to protect your money. Your mint will create your own coins. Your centralized infrastructure, if you have a centralized economy. Your trade center is fun because your trade center right now, my economy is not big and my population's small, but I could transfer 7,834 grain into LB, or that amount in LB to grain. So if you have a city that's not really balanced, it's a good way to pay the deficit of the other. Now you have mine and refinery. Obviously, if you find resources, salt, copper, iron, aquamarine, diamonds, you need those mines to take them out. And the refinery just gives you a better product. You still make money with the mine. You make a lot more money with the refinery. You have your lumber mills, right? We spoke about deep forests. I know I have a lot of deep forests because I have a high number on forest. So at this point, I can build 5 lumber mills that will provide me with a profit. Breweries, if I decide to have Baileys. So at that point, it's going to give me my number here. I can build that, and that will provide me money and alcohol to my citizens. Your church, your religious infrastructure. Different church, different temple, same thing. What do? They actually raise your religious score, and they convert people to your religion. All right, so if you have school and religion, you're changing your culture, you're changing your religion, you're stabilizing, and you're becoming sustainable long-term for your city. Taxes are all here. You can modify your taxes. If you start the game, I would not touch that until I get a bit more comfortable with the economy. So you have your base rate, your upkeep is here. That's the only thing you can't change. Your upkeep's going to be modified with your skills, with your policies, with different things you do. It will go higher or lower. The tax you can change. Now, the modifier is something I put in. It's hard to explain. Your modifier will raise your tax. And that's okay, but it's efficiencies. So, meaning it's not more tax, it's just a better way of managing that tax. So, if you see a tax at 53%, but you see a modifier at 3%, your tax is still at 50. But you're finding 3% efficiencies within that tax rate, which is incredible. So you want, if you're an economy guy, you want those modifiers. You want to find efficiencies. You want more money. This gives you a better idea of where the money's going. So my upkeep right now is 200,000. My structural, so my passive is right here. So that's, if I sold all my building at full price, that's how much money gets in my pocket. Your wages in LB, how much I'm taxing. You see, I'm paying 152, but I'm getting 76,000 back in taxes. Same thing with the grain. Local trade is when I spoke about those hunters. I spoke about those trade routes. Get your local economy going. That is good. It will raise your economy score. It will make your market more valuable. It will make you create more stands. It will get the economy flowing. Economy per population, that is also something that affects your economy score, but it affects also if you start your own currency. You want that number in positive, meaning people have money to spend. And when they have money to spend, they go where? They go at your market. Your traffic gets higher. You get more stand. You get more money in. Your economy rates. Now we have a skill that can raise those, which is great. But for the Fairport in 4.0, they will remain static. The idea is that in 4.1 or 4.2, this will start fluctuating within your region. So if everybody has lumber mills, the wood may drop in prices. If you're the only one doing wood and nobody else cares, then this amount may go up. But that is for the future. Right now, they're pretty static. They can be modified somewhat with your skills, which is good because that means you're raising the price, meaning you're doing a better profit. So all your rates and what it's worth is all here. You can see lumber is worth more than hunting, than fishing per se, because lumber is vital to your society, to your empire. And obviously, your minerals and stones are uh, very appreciated. After that, you have all your military infrastructure. Here, you can build any small and medium units without academies. Anything that's heavy and siege engines need an academy. They build usually 1,000 a turn. The academy here will build one siege engine a turn, and your spy will do 1,000 spy a turn, special units, assassins, and so on. What's different here is your shipyard will build warships. Depending on the size of the shipyard, you can build more ship, bigger ship, better ship. Your docks is important when you start trying to bring your army somewhere by ship. So at that point, you need a dock to upload your soldiers, to get your soldiers into ships to send them attack another nations. The bigger the dock, the more transfer you can do, the more back and forth you can do with your ships. Barracks basically affects the training of your units. So the better trained, better soldiers, more chance of victory. Your trade routes is another infrastructure / economy component. So you can actually do trade with other AI cities. You can sell a product, you can make just a policy with them. And what it does is basically they create more stands for you. They come in and they want to sell their product, creating a tax, right, of everything they sell, thus making your income higher. So you want those trade routes happening as much as possible. So for every agreement of $5,000, you get one stand more into your markets. So things to understand there is you can play with AI like that, raise that trade route, but once you conquer that city, that becomes frozen. You cannot negotiate more with yourself to raise the price or raise the amount of stands they can do. If you conquer the city and move that city, because you cannot have 100,000 cities, you won't have enough action point to manage them. So if you sell that city, that trade route does not exist. You cannot have more than 4 trade routes going at a time per city. So if you were to sell this one, then it would open it up to another city. Walls. Walls are very important. Very, very important. Why? Because they give bonuses to your defending units within your city. So if my units were fighting within my city, that's the bonus to their defense score that they have. Even better, if you have a stone wall, any ranged unit that you have inside that city can engage without taking damage, engage the sieging army. I have archers, I'm being sieged. Every turn, the sieging army will lose soldiers due to my archers. Now, they probably have siege engine that's creating damage to my army, but I'm also creating some damage to them. If you wanted any cities with small stone walls and wooden walls, you can rush it. You can say, screw the siege engine, I'm putting ladder up and I'm taking that city. So if you were, units will come in with their own percentage, but every defending unit would have that percentage added to their defense. Meaning, I would lose more soldiers quicker, but I pay the price. Basically, wooden and small stone wall, ballistas can do the job. Medium and large, I need at least a catapult. And for huge stone, I need a trebuchet. Let me tell you, the trebuchet, we just reviewed the stats and the way it worked. They are beasts. They have some weaknesses, but when it comes to wall, I can tell you within 1 hour, that wooden wall doesn't even exist. Like the city, half the city doesn't even exist after an hour. Trebuchets are awesome. They have their weaknesses, and we'll talk about it later, but it's a great way of destroying walls. The next one here are your roads, canal, bridges, tolled, and outposts. So you can build roads. And the joy of roads is that any military unit using that road doubles their movement. So if I move 10, I now move 20, so on and so forth. But it works both ways. If an invading army gets on my road, they also move as twice as fast. So you need to keep that in mind. Canals is often used when you have two rivers and there's a few square there. And if they connected, you would have access to the ocean. So at that point, they build canals so the ships can go from inlands to ocean or ocean to inland. Bridges, army do not cross water. They can do the little jump diagonally if it's one square, but they will not cross a full square of water. A bridge will solve that. We'll just put it over it, and then your army can cross a small lake fairly easily, or a river. Outposts, we'll speak about it later, but outposts is vital to see if an army's coming on your land. In 3.3, if you declare that land yours, you could see any military going in. That's not the case anymore. So outpost becomes vital. They detect army coming in your land. They detect any type of movement in your land. Tolled is for canals, for bridges, for road. You can build tolled, put small garrison there, and it will bring you incomes at that point. It doesn't do anything for your market. It just brings a little bit of income on the side. Employment, you have your list of workers. You already have some workers that are working and trying to raise or lower the rates, or work my farms or my boats. And I have rat catchers lowering my disease rate. So those workers, some of them are automatic. So if I build a religious structure, I'll have priests appearing. Same thing with doctors for hospital, for example. Upkeepers, it's all based on my structural. So the more building I have, the more upkeepers I have. Traders would be your trade center, and so on and so forth. Engineers, you can hire. What they do is they explore like explorers, and we'll see that later, but for minerals. All right. Military. It's a good snapshot of the military you have in that city. What type of units? Are they light, medium, heavy? And the unit itself, are they infantry, cavalry, archers, or siege engines? Now here you need to see is how many HP one unit has, the number of units, so the number of soldiers. So I would have 800 light infantry at 5 HP each soldier. I have 400 medium infantry, and I have 800 light archers. So I have the numbers of soldiers I have here. Breaking morale, if I get into a fight and I'm having a bad luck and really doing a bad move, there's 51% chance that my army is going to keep fighting. There's 49% chance that say, screw you, I'm turning around and fleeing. Meaning the damage that unit's going to take now is triple, even quadruple at times. That is also geared towards my training. The higher the training, the better breaking point I have. So you need to always make sure that the units are well trained to raise that number as high as possible. As you can see, the heavier it gets, the better it is, just because they usually have more experience. If your armor, better weaponry, the soldier feel more confident going in combat. Your speed. Land unit use original squares, meaning the small one. So 20 small squares, 10, 5, 40, 20, 10. So that's how many squares they can do. Remember, cavalry does not do mountains. Infantry does mountains, but light mountains reduce it by half, and heavy mountains by a quarter. So keep in mind that mountains without roads are not fun. Archers, same thing, they have a movement. And your siege engine always move the same speed as your slowest unit in your army. Trebuchets is a bit different. They will slow down your slowest army by one and then follow that unit. Attack defense, those are the scores. So infantry a bit more base in defense, cavalry a bit more on the attack, and archers a bit a mix of two, but archers, if they get into melee combat, they fall really quick. The cost in LB and grain of each unit, the total cost of my army, and so on. Then I have my special unit. Fetimid does not have the berserker. It was clearly an example. Transport. And we'll come to transport when we talk about siege. Here I have my C units, the type of ships I have, their damage, their speed. C unit uses nation square, so the big square. So an exploring ship does 8 big square in 1 week. And the transport can do up to 10 big square a week. So the speed of ships are a bit higher, well, a lot higher, but oceans sometimes are bigger. So you need to count that differently. Remember, not all nations have specialty sea units. Not all nations have heavy ships. Some have small, medium. Others don't have the nation transport. They just have the small transport. So every nation is different in that sense. And finally, your unique units. Assassins, priest, spy, anti-spy. Why are priests there? It's because religious figures can send priests as a unit not attached to a religious infrastructure. So the Pope could send priests to Muslim land to convert them into Catholics. So their Catholic nations, when they attack, get in and doesn't have to deal with the religious backlash of that nation. So the Pope, in that sense, can do several things. He can send priests to create tension into an empire that's Muslim, just to create some space and trouble for their nation, their Catholic nation, to invade that player. That's why it's in unique units. Assassin, don't have to explain it. You send it, you kill. Spy, anti-spy, we explain it. So the spy will get information, anti-spy will try to stop the spy. The number, the percentage will define what happens there. Villages are attached to city. They have the same kind of square. They don't have markets, so the food is really where it's happening. They have some infrastructure you can build. You can do lumber mill and brewery. You can do some fishing. Then you have the type of workers, and they have their own little rates, crime rate, fire rates. So they have their own rates. You have to fix it in the village too. Just know that anything you hire will come here to your working and will lower unemployment for you. Any amount of money in grain is directly pushed in your city, making it better managed. So some of things are incorporated into your city and others are really for the village itself. So those are the sheets you're going to use. Now I just wanted to go quickly over concepts. They'll be added to the book. We're working on that. So things to consider is exploring. You will start with one square. Obviously, you want to know what's going around. You have different way of doing that. You have the explorer and the explorer on horseback. What's the major difference? The explorer goes one square at a time. The horseback one does two square at a time. You need less explorer on horseback than you would do normal explorers. Now, the difference is an explorer that sees another explorer, you will get in the announcement, your explorers encountered an explorer. That's it. That's all. No more nor less. If your horseback explorers find an explorer, he will kill it. And he will tell you where they're from. Problem is that, let's say Diego sends horseback explorer, I'm from the Song dynasty, he gets my explorer, kills him. He gets, hey, we've encountered explorers from the Song, they're dead, we're good to go. For me though, that gives me the opportunity to declare war on him for free. Remember, declaring war costs AP. They cost 35 action points to declare the war, and then they have fees per year of war. So if I do that, Diego will start spending 35 action points and so many action points per turn to get that shit going. I will have all of that free because he provoked me into that war. So you need to be aware of that. Horseback explorer will also kill engineers. You know, the guys finding your resources, if they see them, they kill them. Same thing there. We've encountered engineer, they're from the Song dynasty. So now you know he was looking for resources, but it gives that Song dynasty the excuse to declare war to you. So horseback costs more, right? They're right here. They do cost more than explorers, but I need half of them, and they do it twice as quickly. But they kill. And if they kill, they create war opportunities. So keep that in mind. Now, if you have horseback explorers and you go into nations that are controlled by AI, they don't have explorers. It's a non-issue. But if there's a player there, then you've just created your first connection to that player is war. So just keep that in mind. So that is basically your explorer slash. You cannot advise horseback explorer not to kill. That's part of the unit. If you want it, you have to live with those consequences. So the other exploring unit is the engineer. You hire 50, they're right here. They cost money, but they fine you money. So they'll do one square, one nation square, the 20 by 20, and they will tell you every resources there is or lack of in that square. And then those 50 can be moved every week. You can hire 600 if you want and do multiple squares at a time. But just know they're considered explorers. They just don't discover anything on land. They discover resources. Now, the one I want to survey with you quickly is the war component, the war concept. So there's different type of war that didn't exist in 3.3. In 3.3, war was war and that was it. Now you have type of wars in 4.0. You actually have um, four types of them. You have the open field combat. That's when there's no city around, there's no villages in question. It's basically my army that was going that way, your army going that way. We planned it or we didn't plan it that way, but two army comes face to face. It's forest, plain, light forest, mountain, doesn't matter. And we're going to fight it out in open terrain. It's the most easiest one. It's going to be your units against my units, my war score against your war score, and we're going to go at it. And the winner takes all. The other one is siege. So let's say there's a city and I want that city. I can storm the city if they have wood or small stone wall, but my unit gets the defensive bonus. So that's not a siege. That's really just attacking, and it's more like an open field. But if I see that wall and I see a large army there, and I'm like, there's no way my army can take that one inside the castle, I can decide to siege. What does siege do? Is I surround the city, I let nothing in, nothing out. Meaning, if he has a central economy, he's kind of screwed. I'm counting the time. Now, my sieging army needs transport from my closest city to send, food and resources to my army. So that can be attacked if I can find a way of knowing that route. If I don't know it, I can attack that. I'll have to deal with the sieging army. Meaning, if I have a city close, I can send that army to attack the sieging army and liberate my city. If I'm too far and the city fall before I get there, then that army would walk in, and now I'm sieging that army in that city. The problem is now I have a wall, and he may decide to defend. He may have resources with him that permits him to stay long until he gets reinforcement, or have a big enough army that he will just attack me and push me back. So that's what we consider siege. The other type of war we have is what we call the raiding battle. So again, remember we spoke about your central economy having transport. Now we're talking about siege having transport. If I can define where those transport routes are, and I'm not going to tell you how to do this, but there's multiple ways, and I find that, then I can attack those trade routes. I can attack those transport routes. And when I do that, if that is not defended well or have a bigger army, I can take the money or the resources and take them away. So that's another way of combat. Now, obviously, my military unit has to be faster than those transport. And you saw later on, we put the speed of the transport that are 40. So light cavalry is ideal to attack those transport. Heavy infantry won't make it. It's too fast. All right? Or you put all your heavy infantry on the road where the transport pass, and then they walk into it. So you have to plan it out. But that being said, if you do that, and I have an outpost, I'll know the army's there, and instead of a transport, you may be dealing with a large army coming down that road. The other fighting that could happen, and it's going to be really unique, we couldn't place it anywhere, is if I have my transport ship carrying my soldiers, and they drop them off on land, not close to any city or villages. They're just dropping them there to move north or south to support an army, to attack a city. And I have an outpost, and I figure out, hey, shit, he's dropping soldiers, and I have an army, and I'm attacking. At that point, you wouldn't be attacking the full army at a time, because he has still to unload his soldiers on the beach or on the plane. But I have an army attacking, so that would give me an advantage. It's going to be really rare. You would have to know where he drops. You would have the outpost. You would need the army. But if it was to happen, engage. You will have an advantage for sure. So, if a good question here, if defender outpost sees enemy troops, the enemy troops will also report back that they saw the outpost. Outpost, and I should speak about outposts right now. Outpost detects any army in his nation square, but in any surrounding nation square. So that means if you drop off here and I'm 1 square away, that army wouldn't see the outpost. The outpost would see the army because I have scouts going around to the outpost. So at that point, I would have no knowledge of that outpost. So that army could arrive from nowhere and attack as I'm dropping off. Now, remember, there's speed to those units, but let's say I have a road and a lot of light cavalry. That's 80 squares. 80 squares is actually 4 nation squares, right? So it could come from far and get into it. So know that every unit is valuable for certain situation. We had players that said, medium infantry is my way to go. I hire only medium infantry. It's my unit. And they go on with that and saw quickly they had little success. Why? Because you're not adapting to the war that's being battled. You're just choosing one unit to fight it. And sometimes that makes a difference. So be aware, if you're within a city with a lot of walls, you want archery. You know, if you're attacking those transport and making those long runs, cavalry might be better. If I want to bulk and just hit hard, infantry might be it. You know, I'm sieging, I'll need siege engines. I'm not sieging with nothing. It doesn't help. But if I have siege engine, I'm breaking that wall. I'm hurting his army. I'm making pressure. I'm pushing forward. So don't know that every unit has their advantage and should be used properly. We speak also about factors, you know, your skills, your advisor. Some units are better against others, you know, technology, train your troops, make sure that your war score is high if you plan on doing war a lot. It's normal. So those are factors that are in. And another thing we stopped counting is your special unit. And you'll see that in the manual soon. We did about 75% of that. Some units are great explorers because if they're less than 1,000 in a unit, so 1,000 and less, they are undetectable by any units. Some other units don't have the breaking morale. Berserkers, for example, they fight to the death and that's it, that's all. Some units like the war elephant, when you see them, you have to roll a breaking morale. And if they lose more than 25% of their elephants, they turn around and they can't charge against their army instead of the enemy. So read on those special units. The camel rider move fast because they're a cavalry unit, and they move twice as fast in any desert. So just imagine in Africa, they almost cross half of Africa in almost a turn. Why? Because they're in their element. So having camel riders, if you're in that environment, would be ideal, you know, but you get in deep forests and they get penalties instead. So camel riders in Novgorod, not helping, but camels in Africa or Mideast, for sure. You know, you have the long bow in England, twice as range, a lot of damage, low defense, but that's fine. You put him in your city. Just imagine your city defending by that unit. Man, that's hardcore to take over, you know? So every special unit has their advantage, you know? The Jaguar Warrior from Mayan and Aztecs. Anything in Deep Forest, they have double movement, they gain attack bonuses, and they're undetectable if there's 2,500 or less of them. Major change. The problem, you can only recruit them in the Aztec or the Mayan society. Meaning, if you build an academy in France, doesn't work. You can't hire them from them. So you need to transport them into your nation. So advantages, disadvantages, and special unit make a major difference in war if you play them right. You know, berserkers, I'm sorry. They show up, you better be prepared, buddy, because they're not turning back. They will not run away. But then you have Teutonic Knights in a light forest plain scenario against berserker. They charge in. Berserkers are goodbye. But deep forest, you're screwed. Berserkers takes over because they can't charge. So all special units have their ability. They'll be given to you. You can only have 4 of them. Pick them wisely. Don't be quick on, okay, I just gained a new nation, you know, do they have a special unit that's different? All right, I'm researching it. What is a special unit? Is it that different? Is that something that you feel will give you an edge? If not, don't take it. But that's basically something that you need to think about when it comes to soldiers. All right, questions. People United, awarded when nation population is under your banner, every village and big village. Okay, so to unite your people, I said your major cities and your cities have to be conquered. When that happens, some villages and big villages will start to migrate into your city. If you wait, they will eventually all come to you. Now, if you want the 15 action points really off the bat, you can send an army to round them up and bring them to your city. So that's why it was worded that way. The wording may be a bit conflicting here, but know that you have to conquer your whole nation. We take for granted once you have your city and major city, the villages will start to migrate within your city. So I hope that answered that question. All right. Perfect. So I think we can end this series.